After nearly a decade, Kyle Lowry decided to remain in Florida this past offseason, and that means our favorite undrafted combo guard, Mr. Bet on Yourself himself, Fred VanVleet, will be taking complete reins of the offense for the first time in his NBA career. What does that mean for the Raptors' plan of attack? What does Freddie need to do to fill the shoes of Kyle Lowry? And more importantly, what can he do to provide his own stamp on the team as we officially usher in the Freddie VanVleet era? Raptors fans, let's talk about it. While it's tricky to completely embrace last year's Tampa season, particularly because of the unique environment the team found itself in, let's do a quick comparison of VanVleet's numbers playing alongside Kyle Lowry and the 14 games he played without Kyle. In terms of points, assists, turnovers, and pretty much every other stat, there really wasn't a noticeable difference with his stat line. There is, of course, the dip in shooting percentages, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But I want to quickly point out, if you remove two specific games, that being the only two contests he did not play over 24 minutes, so the game against the Warriors in which he suffered a hip injury, and his first game back from that injury during which he was on a minute restriction, he has the following stat line. I think this represents the best case scenario for Freddie this season, especially if he's able to sustain it over the course of an entire season. There were only 9 players in the entire league that pulled off 20 plus points and 7 plus assists. So with this best case scenario in mind, what can we guess Freddie will focus on for this upcoming season? Let's start with what I'm most curious to see unfold, and that's his playmaking, starting with the pick and roll. It hasn't been a big part of Freddie's game. In the 2019 championship run, he played a lot off ball, and despite Lowry moving to the off guard spot more and more the past 2 years, it's still something Raptors fans hope VanVleet grows more comfortable with. Whether it's Bismack Biyombo or Serge Ibaka, Kyle often excelled with these tight pocket passes. No matter how small the window, Kyle could thread the needle more often than not. Meanwhile, Fred struggled at times with these angles, occasionally getting his passes tipped as he tried to hit the roller. When he was able to manipulate the defense and catch the big flat-footed, it looked effortless. But when he made the wrong read or the defense had length, it occasionally led to 2 points the other way. Fred had earned the respect of opposing defenses as being a dangerous shooter off the screen, and it'll sometimes result in a hard hedge from the pick and roll defenders. The added pressure, and depending on the defender the increased length, has made it difficult for Fred in the past. The more and more Fred gets comfortable with handling this type of pressure, the better off the Raps will be for it. But we also know Nick will draw sets to help his guys out. For instance, at times, Nick would run double screens to make it problematic for defenses to hedge out on Fred, like in this play that involves Kyle setting a brush screen on Adams. In this next clip, Nick runs 3 screens, with Boucher and Siakam setting on ball and OG setting one off ball. The added layer of chaos gives Fred that extra bit of breathing room and another threat for the defense to consider. Now, Fred being an undersized point guard has always been a talking point amongst Raps fans since joining the team. And despite him always overcoming the odds, it has impacted him as a playmaker to a degree, particularly on lob attempts or as he tries to get it over defenders. One way Fred has countered this are with his jump passes. However, on occasions, it does hurt him when he has nowhere to go. When Freddie gets lost in the trees and leaves his feet, it normally results in compromising situations. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him keep his dribble alive a bit more this year to probe the defense and utilize his shiftiness when he doesn't like the initial look. Like Pascal, Fred often excelled in Nick's scheme when he had a big that could stretch the floor. With how dangerous of a shooter Fred has become, the pick and pop is an effective set for him since it's a less risky pass and they can always flow into a 5-out set afterwards. Improved consistency from Boucher, further encouragement with Birch, and a developmental year for Achua, who we saw let it fly during Summer League, will go a long way for Freddie. I also expect Nurse to continue to use dribble handoffs for Fred to take advantage of his agility in half-court sets. VanVleet will still need to make the right reads, but doing so after a DHO and rolling downhill has been more conducive to his success in the past. Mixing this kind of movement with the double screens we saw earlier should help ease Freddie in as he continues to develop in standard high screen sets. Going back to earlier in this breakdown, we mentioned how Fred's shooting percentages dropped with the added responsibilities. It's quite common for players to see that initial dip in efficiency when thrusted into a lead role, especially with the defense allocating additional resources to stopping someone. For someone like Fred, if we use that 20 points and 7 assists benchmark we talked about earlier, I'd like to see him average just over 42% from the field and in the high 30s from deep, which is something Kyle consistently did during his tenure with the Raptors. With this in mind, I'm excited to see if the continued evolution of Freddie involves a more diversified attack. Any Raptors fan knows Freddie is just as fearless as Kyle when it comes to attacking the basket, and you could argue that he's even a bit braver, and it's due to his crafty layup package and his ability to contort his body. However, as you all know, this will sometimes result in attempts with a high degree of difficulty that could be traded for other types of attempts, especially on the fast break. I'd love to see Freddie continue to work on that in-between game, as it would perfectly complement his current style, especially if his three ball isn't falling or when the opposing defense has solid rim protection. First thing we're hoping to see more of is a consistent floater. For someone who finds himself in the paint as often as VanVleet does, adding a floater would do wonders. If anything, just to give opposing defenses something else to think about, which could then lead to windows staying open for a split second longer on his layup attempts. The second thing we're looking forward to is the continued development of his mid-range jumper. We were spoiled by DeRozan's mid-range magic and Kawhi being an assassin during the 2019 season. And then of course there's Kyle's signature left dribble into a pull-up mid-range jump shot. Freddie has already started this process, but additional in-game reps and a comfort level with his mid-range jumper will go a long way, especially if he can use it as a bailout option when he doesn't like what he sees on the initial dribble drive penetration. For the first time since the 2011-2012 season, we won't have Kyle Lowry suiting up for us as our point guard. And while the shadow he casts looms during a fork-in-the-road type of season, Raptors fans understands this transition has been in the works for some time now, and Kyle has always seen a bit of himself in who he's often referred to as his little brother. Fred played a big part in bringing a championship to the city of Toronto, turning it on during a shooting slump and when people counted him out. Regardless of what happens in his first full year as the starting point guard, Raptors fans should feel comfortable with betting on Fred VanVleet.